about to hear a revolution in talk radio. Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano. This is America's Libertarian Voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. This broadcast is being brought to you live on Monday, December 5th, 2015. It is now about 8:01 a.m. Central Time in what was once known as the good old USA. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. During our live broadcast, we invite you to call 646-652-4620 or toll-free 888-773-4496. Before we get started, I would also like to remind our listeners to subscribe to our reminder service by visiting our website, libertytalkradio.com, and clicking on the subscribe icon button right on the home screen. We do not sell your name. All we do is use that as a vehicle to remind you of our upcoming broadcast. Very simple, very plain, won't take much time of yours at all. And for those of you who tweet, my Twitter address is @LibertyJoe. Now on to our show. You know, folks, one of my favorite programs is Shark Tank, and for many reasons. I identify in a sense. Now I'm not a billionaire like the sharks are. But what they do on this program, if people present to the sharks, which is usually about five entrepreneurs that are billionaires, business plans, and to see if they can entice them to invest in their ideas. Now, what I like about that is that it's purely voluntary. There is no hitches. If you want to do it, a guy can have a perfect plan. A person can present a perfect plan, and if a shark is just not interested, he says, not interested, period. It is pure entrepreneurial and exemplifies the essence of free exchange among individuals. Now, from time to time, someone will present a business proposition that may not be fully developed yet. But one of the sharks, or maybe more than one of the sharks, might sympathize with this person's position. And they'll say, you know, I normally don't do this. You know, it's a little bit too early, but I really believe in you. Those words, I really believe in you. And I remember when I was in your shoes, and I see myself in you, I'll give you your $150,000 for 25% stake in your business, as you asked. And to me, that epitomizes not the division of people, but the solidification of people's interest. And I love watching that program for that reason. Now, I have been approached many times by people who were interested in starting businesses. And quite frankly, most of the time, I've helped them out. Unfortunately, most of the time, I lost all my money, and sometimes a sizable amount. And some of these people were prominent people, and they lost their money as well. I have to admit, I do not have a good track record, but I'm getting better at it. I still am available. I would be more than happy, to participate in a business enterprise. I probably am a little bit more astute now, have a little bit more insight, especially from watching that program. And it sort of helped because I identify with that. Another program I like is I Profit, but instead of profit like in prophecy, it's Profit, Profit. And he goes in and he salvages businesses. And you realize, now I opened up 4 audiology practices for my wife. I have an occupational health testing business. I started from absolute scratch, helping someone else out who totally failed, had to pick up the business. It failed 3 times. So I started that business 3 times, basically. And so I identify, pardon me, I had a sneeze. Anyway, but in all of that, there was always a consensus. There were always people banding together, for a common purpose and enterprise. Oh, I don't know. I don't know what's the matter with me. I'm sneezing like crazy. And there was no what I call bifurcation. Now, there is a bifurcation when people's interests are not genuine, and they go in with one purpose, but once they receive the money, the purpose changes. And now you have a bifurcation of interest. Now, where I see that the most, and of course, that always results in failure. And typically the person who invests loses all their money, as I have. But also the person who takes the money for reasons other than were sort of thought genuinely to be presented, right? They always lose also. I mean, they think they're gaining, but you see, they failed before, and they repeat that pattern. Now, where I see bifurcation in the grandest scheme is in government. You see, without some sort of bifurcation of the masses, the government loses so much of its bargaining power. And let me just go down a list for a second. When I say, and I'm going to discuss these in depth. But we have Christians versus Muslims. We have blacks against whites. We have war against peace. We have financial assistance programs and those who have to pay for it. How about we have Republicans versus Democrats? How about retirees versus those that are still working? How about liberals versus conservatives? How about women's rights versus men's rights? I've never heard of that before, but women's rights versus everything else. How about the poor and the rich? Or how about the poor and the not so poor? Or the non-poor? No, let's call them the non-poor. We came up with a new phrase now. We have the non-poor. I'm the non-poor. I wouldn't consider myself in the rich category, although I think I'm pretty wealthy, but I wouldn't consider myself the rich. You know, I don't act rich, I don't spend rich or anything like that. I don't have an island that I own or anything like that, like Branson does. But I'm the non-poor, all right? But there's the poor and then there's the non-poor. Then you have the vets and those people who are non-vets. And then you have the handicapped versus people who would be considered more normal physically. And then you have employers versus employees. Now, normally, none of these issues, none of these titles, I guess, would be of any concern to anyone. If the government would stay out of it, there would be no concern. There wouldn't be this division because people would work it out themselves. Sort of like the Shark Tank. There's a person who is wealthy with money, a person who is just about eking out an existence, starting up a business, right? You have the rich and the not so rich, or maybe the poor. And yet, they meld together. And when they meld together, what happens? They both gain. The government never wants both parties to gain, because when they do, the government misses out. The government is left out. And the government doesn't want to be left out, because then they abdicate their bargaining chip during an election. They can't say, well, we left everyone alone and everyone worked out their problems and things worked out fine. Now I'm running for election. People say, what do we need you for? And that would be the right question. Why do we need you? We don't need you. Just like they said, those that we put in government represent the people. They don't have to be highly qualified for anything other than one thing: to make sure that they do not interfere with that free association among people. But the government interferes with this free association, and as a result, we have poor versus non-poor. We have black versus white. We have female versus male. We have Republican versus Democrat. We have vets versus non-vets, handicapped versus noble. You name it. You name the program, and I will guarantee you that there will be the other side of the story. And the government will take sides, both sides, depending on who they are, depending on what party they're in, depending on if they think they can win with those votes. They will promote that and cause this agitation in society where people always seem to be fighting against themselves. And people say, why can't we get along? People ask that question, why can't we get along? Why can't society work together? Well, it's simple, because government doesn't want it that way. If society worked well together, we'd say, hey, government, listen, read the Constitution. We don't need you. We'll work it out as they work it out on Shark Tank. Now, on Shark Tank, do all the people get their money? No, I'd say 1 out of 3 or 4 probably get their money. But those who don't always come out and say, I have even more resolve today than ever. I'm going to prove them wrong. Some even come back for a second time and said, now I did what you said I wanted, what you said I had to do. This is what I did. This is what happened. Now I'm asking for $250,000. And they usually get it. I mean, there's harmony in there. There's harmony in saying no. There's harmony in pushing people to their own limit. But government doesn't want that. Government wants people to abdicate their responsibility so they can hand them something and then divide the population. And when they divide the population, then they have 2 voting blocks. Then you have the white versus the black. You have the poor versus the non-poor. You have the liberals versus the conservatives. You have the Republicans versus the Democrats. You have women's rights versus men's rights. You have employee versus employer. You know, all of this. And I want to give you an example, and I don't like giving this example, but it's classic. You know, is this black versus white? Now, you would think if the government truly wanted to have a homogeneous society where people got along very well with one another, right? When these riots broke out, the government should have been silent. It wasn't the government's problem. The government didn't cause this problem. And if a politician was forced to say anything at all, he would say, you know, guys, listen, things happen. Grow up. If someone did something wrong, they'll be punished. And if they're not, sometimes people get away with bad things. Look at your own life. Everyone, whether you're black, white, brown, whatever. There are things that we do wrong. Sometimes we get away with it. Sometimes we don't. You want to improve your society? It's up to you. You're not going to improve your lot in life by destroying the very town that you live in. You are destroying yourself. Now, if you can't see that, if you can't look within yourselves and say, we have to build a better society, which means we have to build a better family, we have to be more responsible, we have to be more productive. If you can't see that, then you'll live in abject poverty. You deserve exactly what you sow. You sow nothing, you get nothing. Now grow up, get back to work. Everyone. And if the government had to take any position, that's the type of position they should have taken. They said that the government could say, we are not taking position black versus white. We're not saying police versus non-police or anything like that. Now, the world's not perfect. Get over it. Get around it. Make peace. You don't like the police department? Become a police officer and change it. Become the police commissioner. But stop throwing rocks. Because you're not getting any sympathy, you're not getting any help. And any company that was burnt down or looted and closed down, they should stay closed down, and then you have to walk now another 2 miles to find what you want. Really good. You know, I mean, we should be more responsible. Instead of saying, we understand. No, we don't understand. Life ain't easy. Not everyone's got a silver spoon in their mouth. Some people have to work. What if every time one of my companies went down, I went in the street and rioted or something? And then the government gave me money. Would that be responsible? No, we would be bifurcating the country because there are those people who didn't get any public assistance, you know, because they worked hard, they were smarter, their companies didn't go under. And they're not being rewarded. They're paying the government to pay me because I'm irresponsible. Bifurcating the country again. Anytime the government steps in, it bifurcates the country. Right? Now, folks, I'd like to hear your views. 646-652-4620 or toll free 888-773-4496. We're going to stop for a quick break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, this is Joe Cristiano. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio, and we're back. We are talking about the bifurcation of society and how the government forces this because it serves their needs. It serves the government's needs for bifurcation of society. It serves them not if we get along. If once you and I get along, we don't need the government is weakened. Their power is lessened. They don't want that. They want us not to get along. They want this bifurcation. This is how they survive. That's why, let's take, for example, the two-party system. Now, that's the dumbest idea in the world. Two-party system. That means there are Republicans and there are Democrats. Now, I know there are libertarians, and there's the Tea Party, and there's the independents, and there's the Constitution Party. Yeah. And what happens during the debates for president? Anybody who is not in the system, like the Barack Obamas and the Hillary Clintons and the Romneys and the McCains, all those people, when there's a debate, right, those people who are most closely aligned with government policy, not the Constitution, not the will of the people, but government sustaining policies of bifurcation, if they're really into it, they get center stage every single time. Those people are saying, hey, there's something wrong. We should really change the system. Where do they go? First of all, they may not get invited. And secondly, if they are invited, they're put at the end of the debate and they're never even asked a question. They're sort of like, well, they're there, but folks, don't vote for him. Person doesn't have a chance. He's sort of radical. He's like crazy, because he believes in freedom, the Constitution, free enterprise, and he doesn't believe in the oligarchy that we have right now. And the people have become so incredibly ignorant. The people aren't stupid, but they're ignorant of what is going on. They have been so brainwashed, they believe this crap. Luckily, fewer and fewer people are voting. Less than half the people vote now, and which I think is great. I think no one should vote. Could you imagine if there was a presidential election and 17 people voted total in the United States? So-and-so got 6 votes and the other person, got 11 votes and the 11 votes won. There would be an uproar. They said, no, this person didn't win. No one wants them. Now, if the government wanted to avoid bifurcation, what they would do is say that if there are 12% of the population is libertarian, 12% of Congress should be represented by the libertarian point of view. Right? If there are 40% conservatives, 40% of the people should be represented in Congress. In other words, that'd be true representation. But the government doesn't want that, because if anyone stood a chance of getting in, that maybe 12% libertarian, maybe 40% libertarian overnight, right? Which means what? Means, no, we don't need the government. We don't want the bifurcation of society anymore. We want a holistic society where people get together and truly understand. We want an educated society. Government can't handle that. Because once you have an educated, thinking society, people go, we don't want the type of government we have now. And that means all of these criminals that are in Congress right now, or in Washington, and there's a bunch of criminals in Washington, people looking for money, giving money out, organizations that no one knows exist, that people get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, produce nothing, they would be gone. Because the people in office would vote this stuff out. Now, every time the government steps in, it costs money. When it costs money, where does the money come from? It comes from you. So the government takes the money from you and supports an activity that may be not only unconstitutional, but actually illegal. Let me give you an example, the one that I think is a prime example, and probably the most egregious one that we have right now, what we've had now for probably the past 75 years. Of course, we have to have a strong defense. That means we have to defend ourselves. But when the president comes out and says, well, this person is really bad in this country, 7,000 miles away, and we need to send our troops there to wipe these people out, because they represent a danger to our form of democracy or our form of living, so we have to send our troops there. Do we know that's the truth? No, we don't. Was there a declaration of war by Congress? No. But then we take our young men and women, ship them 7,000 miles away to some godforsaken desert somewhere or mountainous desert area. Many come back psychologically wounded, physically wounded, disillusioned, depressed, mentally bonkers, right? They come back and they seek medical advice, medical assistance, of which we don't have the money to provide. Or if we do provide, we provide it well, but in many cases we don't provide it at all. So now you have the veterans coming out and saying, hey, we need help, we need help, we need help. Well, the reason why they need help is that they believe the government in creating a war. Were these people really defending America? Or were we, in fact, the aggressors in that country? Well, if you lived in that other country 7,000 miles away, you wouldn't say that we are the aggressors. We'd say the United States are the aggressors. They're here bombing our country. Oh, are there bad people there that want to see harm to us? Probably so, but for probably a reason. There's got to be a reason for it, not just because they just hate our freedom. Don't be that stupid. But now we have a bifurcation of society. We have those people who are saying, we value your service. Thank you very much for serving America. And then you have the other fraction of America said, he didn't serve America. He served an illegitimate government. He served the bankers. He served the military-industrial complex. He ain't serving us at all. Now, it doesn't make him a bad person. He's been duped. And he obeys orders. So you have a bifurcation now of America. Now, if we were not bothering anyone and someone attacked us, we would all take up arms. Everyone who has a 9mm in their bedroom, for self-protection, would come out, would be polished up. But no one would do that because America is the only country that's armed. And then if we fought, and someone fought bravely to protect the homeland because someone was invading us, I'd say thank you for your service. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for protecting my freedom. And there'd be no bifurcation. I mean, who's to say no? I mean, they came here under no provocation whatsoever, just because they thought they can get away with it and maybe gain some land or some industry or whatever the natural resources, and we repel them. I'd say we say thank you for your service. But that would be, everybody would be a soldier then. Men, women, children. Male, female. Young and old, everyone. No bifurcation. Everyone's on the same page. But once we believe the government, we believe the government version of why our men and women are dying and coming back psychologically and physically handicapped, is because we believe what the government says, and it's never the truth. The government has never, ever told the truth. We have a caller on the line now. Let's see what this caller has to say. Caller, you're on the line.
Hello, Joe.
Good morning.
This is Lloyd from Henrietta.
Lloyd, thank you.
What you're explaining is more or less an organic thing that originates naturally. Anytime you have set up a system of a collective, which we would call a government, people have decided to give power in a collective force. There exists a natural opportunity for someone to exercise a collective power.
Right, good point.
So as long as people are caught in the matrix of believing that they need to exist in a collectivized form, you're never going to avoid this bifurcation of one group trying to gain power and another group trying to gain power, and then the two being in conflict with one another and exploiting the regular population who are not trying to get power but just want to live their lives. That's an organic thing. You're not going to get away from it. But when people finally become enlightened enough to realize that we can actually exist without giving power to a collectivized force. Now, this is going way beyond. People don't. You see, we came from being under despotism, and people got a little bit of enlightenment. It's a very gradual thing. They got enlightened enough to say, hey, maybe like in 1215, Magna Carta, they went to King John and said, hey, look, if you want our money, you're going to have to give us certain rights. Well, that was a certain step on the ladder of enlightenment that they decided, hey,
Right.
all people do have a certain amount of rights and not just the ruling despot.
Right.
And then it came along a little while later, we started getting through the Renaissance and people beginning, hey, people have human rights. John Locke, and then Thomas Jefferson writing the Declaration of Independence. People realized that, but they still hadn't come very far. But they're still caught up in the matrix of believing that they still have to have this collectivized ruling authority. And people today, they say, well, we have a republic and not a democracy because democracy is, mob rule. And really, there's very little difference between a republic and a democracy. Both of them agree to a majority consensus of the collective
Right.
to rule over the individual.
That is correct.
They still haven't come out of the matrix far enough to realize
Right.
that it's the individual that has the rights, but they keep still throwing the power to the collective, even in a republic, which I know the conservatives believe, we have a republic and we're not a democracy. Therefore, you have no rights. You've given them to the collective. You elect representatives to have a collectivized power, and then you have to live in subjection to that collectivized power. I'm going out there on,
No, I'm with
I
you.
don't know
No,
if people
I think you're
follow,
right
and I'm
on.
trying to make it as simple as possible.
Yes, and you've done a great job.
Speak on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the anti-Federalists were right, and the Federalists were wrong. I've come to that conclusion. And I try to read the Federalist Papers. I find it very, very difficult because their sentences are like, one sentence could be a page and a half long. They don't know I don't think they learned to make a period out of anything. They can't say anything in about 10 words. But they were right. But also in modern times, I thought that movie, The Matrix, when I first watched it, was so far out and so far reaching, and it took me a little while to realize that we're living in the Matrix. That movie was not really science fiction. That movie was very concurrent. That movie was talking about us, ourselves. Of course, it was an analogy type thing. But you used the word matrix about 2 or 3 times, and I couldn't agree with you more. People live in a matrix. They don't want to believe that. But it's comfortable to be there. And to step out of the matrix as you have and I have and be on the outside looking in is very uncomfortable, is not very attractive to other people. I can't say how many times people say, "Oh, Joe's a radical," or Joe's a weird thinker, and I get all sorts of comments on the way I think and a whole bit. And because they're all in the matrix, and they're afraid to walk out. Once they walk out, and they stand there, and they really start thinking, they go, "Oh my God, why was I ever in there?" But that's a quantum leap for most people. And right now, I'm not sure, short of some financial breakdown of our system, I mean big financial breakdown, not what happened in 2008, but a total collapse of our financial system with the Federal Reserve and all this phony quadrillion dollars that are being printed out there in different currencies. Short of that, I don't think anyone will ever wake up. And when they do wake up, unfortunately for most of them, I think it'll be too late, Lloyd.
Yeah, well, it's like I say, it is an enlightenment, and it's a very long step-by-step process. Look, they gave male citizens' rights with the Declaration of Independence and their Constitution, they realized, hey, yeah, we all need to have rights, but they still did not give slaves the right to even being a person.
Right.
Then, after a while, they realized, these black people that have been slaves, maybe they shouldn't be in slavery. That was another step.
Right.
And then maybe they need to have rights to vote. And, of course, then there were women. Maybe we need to have rights. It's a very step-by-step Now, I don't know if I can agree with women still having a right to vote, but, that's a side note. But anyway, but then person has to realize each person has a right to vote. In other words, they're coming closer and closer to individual sovereignty, but they still have not made the leap from why do we have to give ourselves a collectivized power when it's the individual that's supposed to be sovereign and have that power? Why is it that we have to collectivize that and then relinquish that sovereignty over to a collective, and then we have to live in subjection to that collective? They haven't made that last leap yet.
Yeah, and I object to the fact that someone has to tell me that women have rights. I mean, everyone has the same rights, but no one gives that. This is God-given. This is an inalienable right. Everyone has the natural rights. I mean, the right of free association, the right of movement, the right to breathe, all of them. I don't need the government edict to give that to me. A woman has the same rights as a man does. That she can do whatever she wants to. Whatever. I don't have to wait for the government to tell me whether or not she has the rights or not. But we're always looking to the government to codify it, a right, and so that we can say, all right, now this person is equal to me. And I find that objectionable. I think we've all had the rights forever.
People understand this on a very superficial and an intellectual level, but they haven't internalized the fact that they have these rights. They still, as you're saying, it has to be codified before they actually begin to kind of believe it. But they're relying on that collectivized codification in order to give them the internal authority to believe it. When actually it's the collectivized force is nothing supposedly other than individual forces combined. And the original power of the collective originates from the individual. When people step over that line and begin to realize we do not need collectivized force, a government, people can voluntarily collectivize on a very mutually beneficial exchange level, as you're speaking with Shark Tank. There's no force involved in that.
Right. That's what I love about it.
But people are still caught up in the matrix of believing they have to be forced and to do things to protect people from themselves.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Shark Tank is sometimes, I'll be watching and I'll say, I think I would have invested in that company when all the sharks said no. Now, I'm sure they're more right than I am. Maybe I'm more sympathetic than they are, But it's interesting. I like that principle of free association. And that's why last week when I was talking about the embargo against Cuba, drop dead government. You can't tell me who to associate with because it's my inalienable right to associate with whomever I wish to associate with. You cannot tell me. You cannot take an inalienable right away from me. If I want to call my friend Carlos in Cuba, I'll call him in Cuba. You have no right to tell me I can't do that. Now, if the government doesn't want to send military arms there, they do whatever the hell they want, but don't stop me from doing what I want.
Yeah, but people have allowed the government to tell them who
That's
they
right.
can and cannot associate.
That's right.
with.
Yeah, and then we can get to our school system. Our school system promulgate. They compound the issue, because our school system, our teachers are not stupid, but they're ignorant. They're ignorant of what our rights are. They're ignorant of how government works, and they're very obedient. They just follow orders, and they teach according to a government program. So what they're doing is what they're teaching their children. They're teaching their children not to think, but to be obedient. The worst society you can have is an obedient society. Because that's when you're on the verge of collapse, because everyone is waiting for somebody else to make a decision. And the person who makes a decision is going to do it for their good, not for the good of the people. Then you have collapse or calamity or war or whatever. Anyway, this sounds so good. This is such a uplifting conversation, Lloyd. I think after this I'm going for a strong cup of coffee, you know that.
It's an individual, and it's a very slow process, and like I say, it's going to be on an individual basis that people come to the realization that, yeah, I have a right, and they stepped over and said, oh, we need to be able to vote and to express our ability to be sovereign. But then you have to keep stepping. You have to come and say, I don't need to give my vote to another person in order to express myself individually. I already have that given from the Creator. It's natural law.
Right. But you never hear that.
I'm going to hang up, Joe.
Lloyd, thank you so much for calling. I certainly appreciate the call. Your comments are valid and added to the program, and I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All righty.
All right, take care now. Bye-bye now. You know, he makes an excellent point. You know, we don't want to talk about natural rights, natural law. The government doesn't give me the right to do something. I have the natural right to do whatever I want, provided that I do not infringe upon the equal right of others. In fact, if you look at the libertarian philosophy basically says that you can engage in any activity you want, provided that you do not infringe upon the equal rights of others. What's wrong with that? And people, oh no, you're crazy, you're a nutcake. What? Why? Here, let me guess. Here's a liberty pledge. I pledge allegiance not to the flag, but to the Constitution of the United States of America, because of the rights it protects and the republic it creates, one nation of individuals with liberty and justice for all. I mean, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. What we have now makes no sense whatsoever. Well, I want to thank Lloyd for calling in and adding to the broadcast. This is the end I think this is about the end. We're almost gone for about 45 minutes. I think we'll close up. Thank you very much for listening in. We hope to have we're putting in a split screen camera thing where when people call in, you'll see me on half the screen and then the guest who's remote on the other half of the screen, and we're going to be working on that. If we have that in, I'd like to have Jacob Hornberger from the president of the Future of Freedom Foundation be part of my program coming this Thursday morning, which would be our next broadcast. So stay tuned. I'll send out a notice and let you know whether or not that takes place if we get all our electronics, in the right place at the right time. Okay. This is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. Folks, you can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends. But let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. With that, until next time, I'm Joe Cristiano. This is Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.